Hello, everybody. Welcome to a brand new episode of The Rundown. I'm Sunny Galt. I'm a messenger with United Network News, and we are part, of course, of United Network. And we are also with CARE, the Center for Amity and Restoration of Earth. Our mission each and every week is to bring you the real news. There's a lot of information out there. You probably felt, especially this week, completely bombarded, especially with a lot of negative information and a lot of people giving their take on certain issues. Well, we'll get to all of that in just a bit. But it's hard to know, well, what should you really believe in all of this? And that really comes down to each and every one of you. You have something called discernment. And it is built into your body. It is a natural lie detector. Because whether something is true or false, it's all frequency. And once you learn to tap into that frequency, you will know if something is true or false. And we are living in a day and age where that could not be more important. So whether you're listening to mainstream media or alternative media, or you're just thumbing through feeds, your Twitter X feed, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, whatever it is, you are going to be bombarded with information. Most of it misinformation or disinformation. The difference is misinformation is just information that's not accurate. Disinformation is information that's specifically put out there to draw you away from the truth. There's a lot of people that have a lot of fancy titles right now, especially those in our government, and that's exactly what they're doing right now. So as a human, just know you have the ability to tune into whether something is true or false. Use your discernment in everything, including this podcast episode. What we try to do each and every week is to give you information to make you think, to encourage you to go out there and do more research, talk to other people, find out what else you can find online through books. A lot of the really telling information can be found in books before they started to cover everything up. What can you find? And then when you find something that makes sense, share that with other people. Don't beat them over the head with it. That's not what we're about. But we are living in a day and age where people are craving real information, and they're not getting it from really pretty much anywhere, any official news sources. If this week has taught us anything, it's taught us that. Now, if you want more information about who we are and what we do, you can visit our website at unitednetwork.earth. We are not like any other news outlet you have ever come across before. I guarantee you that. You know, a lot of the information that we have, we do not play for the right. We do not play for the left. We do not play that game. We are on Team Humanity, period. So we go in depth with our stories. And we find out what's really going on behind the scenes. We have an amazing group of field messengers that report on what's going on in their communities. They're not on our payroll. They simply love humanity and want to share the truth. And our goal is to grow our field messengers so there's hundreds of thousands or even more field messengers around the planet just sharing what's going on in their communities, because that is how you break these narratives that they have been feeding us since before there was media. We just didn't realize it. But now we're coming online. Literally, our brains are coming back online. They can't get away with the nonsense anymore. So if you guys are watching this outside of our regular audience, the title for this episode was very intentional, and it is, Why Did Charlie Kirk's Family Get New Government IDs 6 weeks ago? If you're here just to hear that content, then you can fast forward. I think it's going to be probably around an hour and 2 minutes, maybe hour, 3 minutes, somewhere around there is where we talk about Charlie Kirk. These episodes that we do, these podcast episodes, cover a lot of content. And I would encourage you guys to stay for the whole thing because there's a lot of good stuff that we talk about and we share stories from around the world. But I do respect your time and I do understand that the title of this episode has to do with Charlie Kirk. So if you want to fast forward to that, I encourage you to come back, hopefully soon, and listen to the other content that we have because it's pretty special. On that note, let's get to those stories. Here are the rundown of stories you may have missed this week on UNN. Okay, let's kick things off with our incredible field messengers. As I mentioned earlier, field messengers are everyday people. All of you guys listening to this could become a field messenger. We all have these phones that we're chatting all on social media about stuff, right? Well, why don't we start using our phones instead of just to chat back and forth with political narratives and stories that they make up? Why don't we start reconnecting with one another, not fighting, not throwing people under the bus? Why don't we start reconnecting with each other and sharing stories about what is really happening around the world? Because they're trying to get us to look here when we really should be looking over there. And we really should be taking care of one another. But if we can't take 2 seconds to get outside of these narratives and really understand what people in other countries are going through, what people even in your own communities are going through. How many of you don't even know most of your neighbors? Myself included. I'm one of those people. We have to stop this. We have to stop just staring at our phones and everything that's being handed to us. And we have to shift. We have to start being the caring, loving beings that we were created to be. That is our natural state, not this craziness. So let's share some beautiful stories of people around the world that are telling us what's going on. We're going to kick things off in Uganda with Ogarama. Now, this is a story of loss, but it's also a story, I believe, of what we can do to help. So there was a flood that happened very recently in eastern Uganda. Heavy floods came, they destroyed homes, crops, and roads. If you check out the video of this for this news update that came out, this was on Monday. So if you go back, all of our content's on YouTube and Rumble, at least a week after we release it. So if you go back and watch this video, you'll see the craziness. There are still rushing waters. And I believe Ogarama even said that his uncle perished in this flooding, which is incredible that he did a report. It may be one of the driving factors he did. And it's to raise awareness about this because there may be people listening to this that can help. And that doesn't usually mean just donating to the big organizations, guys. This is grassroots and, usually, various religious organizations, small groups that are right in that area. Those are the ones to reach out and help. It's not going to be easy, but this is an opportunity for humanity to come together and help because there are people in eastern Uganda right now that are very much struggling. They didn't have a lot to begin with. Their roads have been greatly impacted by this. And we're not talking about paved streets, guys. We're just talking about what we would consider dirt roads, except it looks very different over there because their soil is different. And cave-ins and cracks and, them just, trying to have basic necessities. These are the things that we need to be focused on. So Ogarama, thank you so much for sharing this story with us. Amy out of New Jersey, which is a state in the United States, talks about her helping a friend, which again, humanity helping humanity. So Amy goes to a place in her area. It's called Turtleback Zoo, but it wasn't to see all the beautiful animals. And she ends up showing us there was this beautiful video of these otters that were playing back and forth. But it's really about her friend because her friend is going through a really hard time, but he loves birds and he used to have a lot of birds. So she took him to this place because they had this great bird exhibit and she got to see a smile on his face. That's what I'm talking about here. And it's beautiful. We got to see a smile on this person's face from watching this video. So thank you for that, Amy. Monica out of Romania talks about a gold museum that's in Romania. In fact, she says it's Europe's only gold museum. We've been learning a lot about gold, and I'm not just talking about buying gold. I know you'll hear a lot of that, especially on alternative media. You got to buy gold. You got to buy silver. All of that is just fear. Okay. But real gold, which is very hard to find, real gold, at least once it's taken out of the earth. But there is very real gold. And the reason behind it is it actually serves as the veins of our planet. So if you think of our veins and how it carries blood throughout our body, think about that when it comes to the earth. If the earth had veins, they would be veins of gold. And the nourishment that the earth receives is actually from God's source, the creator of the universe. It's a very beautiful, we've talked about it many times before. I'm not going to get into it a lot, but when I see stories like this about gold, I'm reminded of the true beauty of gold. And it's not just something you wear in a ring on your finger or a really, nice piece of jewelry. There's a much bigger reason for gold, real gold on this planet. Sophia out of Germany found a sign by the side of the road. Okay, so we're talking about one of those big billboard kind of signs. And it's for the German Foreign Intelligence Service. They have apparently created this advertising campaign, which is sparking some public curiosity, right? Whenever the government does something, especially some of these 3-letter agencies, you really got to take notice of this. And the writing on it, I'll just go ahead and tell you. The writing on it says, "We're looking for terrorists." And then there's another line that says, "Come find them with us." So when you see something like that, what comes to mind? This is the question that Sophia poses to us. What does this sign actually mean? Are they hiring? Is a government agency, intelligence agency, putting out signs to have people come work with them? Are they trying to turn humanity on each other? Because we know that's a game they like to play. Very interesting. Kululeko from South Africa talks about this incredible program that he and his wife have created. They're in the Western Cape area. He happens to be a pastor, and they're making a real difference. It's one thing to say we need to help people that are impoverished or in difficult situations. It's another thing to open up your home, and that's essentially what they've done here. So it's a very inspiring project. It's changing lives. It started, I believe, around serving meals. So they raise the chickens. I mean, they start at the very beginning, guys, raising the chickens. Then they cook the food, including the chickens, usually rice or something like that with it. It looked like there's a little bit of sauce too. And they're feeding more than 100 children from homes that are underserved. And there could be some really bad things happening in their homes too, and they're just trying to lift them up. Part of this in the video are the kids even dancing. It looked like they were kind of doing dancing lessons. I think that's so beautiful. And we really need to be doing this. We need to be reaching out and helping each other. You can't wait on whatever nonprofit to do anything. It's really about us and how are we going to make the world a better place. Causeway from Japan talks about an interesting thing that happened in Japan. If you've ever visited there, at least within the last handful of years, you might be familiar with this. They have a comic book that's really popular over there that has been spreading fear for profit. And in this comic, there's supposed to be some sort of huge eruption. Specifically, they actually give a date, July of 2025, which is already passed. There was supposed to be, according to this comic, this huge eruption on the sea floor that was going to create this tsunami and, I guess, destroy Japan and surrounding areas. This comic got so popular, and it reminds me of like War of the Worlds. This comic book got so popular that it affected tourism for the area. It caused a steep decline. And there was an economic fallout as a result. And just in case you're wondering, guess what happened in July of 2025? Absolutely nothing having to do with an eruption on the seafloor creating a tsunami. You know, I don't doubt at all, this is my own personal opinion, that this comic book was planted, because we know that information is specifically put into our media in hopes that we manifest it to life. And it looks like it didn't work out in their favor here, but it certainly did impact their tourism, which is unfortunate. Hopefully a learning lesson. Paul and Irene from the Netherlands give us another beautiful, uplifting story about how they are taking these surplus pumpkins, which were usually discarded after they did a bunch of seed harvesting. And I don't believe it was actually them that did the seed harvesting. Someone else was doing that, but they weren't using the meat, really, of the pumpkin, or maybe even the seeds. Well, I guess they were using some of the seeds, but there's a lot more to the pumpkin besides just seeds, right? And so they took over this process and are now using these pumpkins to make soup and to give it to people in need. Not only is it helping those people, but it's helping to reduce food waste. It's a beautiful story. Akira from Japan talks about sea salt and a byproduct of this, which is called bittern. I think it's Bittern if you want to look it up. And Akira questions how good this bittern is for our bodies. And I did a quick search. There's hardly any information about this online. This bittern is used to make tofu, but it's also used, it actually becomes hard, okay? If it's mixed with other things, it can become very hard. And so the question that Akira posts is this hardening our body? What about our organs, things that are made out of protein? What's really going on there? So I think that's a very interesting question to ask. Dorothy from Montana, again, another state in the U.S., talks about embracing our health and wellness and making mindful choices. That includes the products we use. I think most of us listening to this can agree with that. And she talks about how she makes her own natural cosmetics. Very interesting, right? I hope we see more and more of this, because we do see commercials. Oh, this is natural. And I question everything out there, right? Because all companies have to worry about their bottom line, and the system is set up to fail. The system is set up for us to not be healthy and to spend a lot more money than we should for these unhealthy products. So let's explore some of the more in-depth stories that the team and I worked on for you guys this week. We're going to start with a drink, very small, like little energy drink here called Feel Free. It is trending. It's been out there for a while, though. It's made by Botanic Tonics, and it's being hyped online as a natural alternative to alcohol. But social media has also raised some big questions about its risks. The drink combines kava, it's a calming root, with kratom, a plant that can act like a stimulant or mimic opioids, making it both euphoric and potentially addictive.
There is a product out there right now called Feel Free that has apparently been out for years, but all of a sudden people have started to go crazy over buying this drink. This guy right here made a video on TikTok telling how he had kids waiting outside of a 7-Eleven just to get him to buy Feel Free for them. And when he refused, they tried to rob him so they could go buy this drink.
Users have reported dependency, withdrawal symptoms, and even needing multiple bottles a day, while medical experts warn of health risks like liver damage and opioid-like withdrawal. Despite FDA warnings and bans in some states and countries, Feel Free remains legal in much of the U.S., sparking lawsuits, updated warning labels, and ongoing debate about its safety. India is intensifying immigration raids after a government order to identify and deport undocumented people in Bangladesh and Myanmar. giving residents just 30 days to prove their citizenship. But critics warn the process is unclear and risks unfairly target Muslim communities, particularly Bengali-speaking Muslims, with reports of mass detentions, demolished homes, and even deportations.
Hindus comprise around 80% of India's population. Muslims comprise about 14%. That means they're somewhere in the region of 200 million Muslims. The project to make them second-class citizens has been going on for over a decade. And a very, very substantial section of the so-called mainstream media has been amplifying this discourse.
Human rights groups say these actions not only echo a long history of discrimination, but also violate international obligations to ensure due process, fair treatment, and protection of basic human dignity. Sexual assault survivors face steep odds of getting justice, with Ireland's latest figure showing that out of nearly 20,000 cases sent to prosecutors since 2015, only about a third, you guys, went to trial, and just half of rape trials end in conviction. Rights groups say such low rates discourage victims from reporting, and recent high-profile cases like the Ballymena youth assault have even sparked broader social unrest. Here's one woman speaking out about her experience in the court system in the U.S.
I waited 3 years, 10 months, and 1 day before I addressed my rapist in court. I thought I would feel stronger or a sense of accomplishment. Instead, I felt like I had barely survived the legal system. I felt even more broken than I already was to begin with. I waited 6 months for my case to even get picked up by the district attorney at the LA County Sex Crimes Unit, after they decided it was strong enough to hold up in court. And while I'm forever grateful for this, I quickly learned the reality of my situation, that the justice system isn't set up to protect survivors.
Obviously, this problem is not unique to Ireland or the U.S., but in the U.S., only 2.8% of reported cases end in felony convictions. In Brazil, India, and China, survivors really worldwide face under-resourced investigations, delays, stigma, and re-traumatizing court processes. Advocates say real reform will take stronger police training, better forensic support, and greater transparency to rebuild trust in a system that too often fails those it should protect. Domestic violence remains a pervasive crisis across Europe, impacting millions of women, men, and even older adults through physical, emotional, sexual, and financial abuse. Countries are responding in different ways. Germany passed its first federal law on domestic violence, though full implementation won't come until 2032. England and Wales reported 2.3 million survivors last year, many trapped due to financial dependence. And nations like Italy, Spain, Portugal, Poland, and Greece have seen rising reports, hotline calls, or arrests. But despite these steps, femicide and underreported cases show just how far there is to go.
We don't talk enough about the number of women who are committing suicide as a result of domestic violence, because that happens in two ways at the moment. So the first part is about the post-breakup period where, these abusers, they're really tenacious. They don't just disappear, and they're protected by the legal justice system, right? Chuck in a whole lot of bullshit, the police will believe them. So unless there's a specific legal intervention, like a DAPO or something else that is enforced by the police, that abuse carries on for months and sometimes years, even if the woman's not living with the man. So that has a really traumatic effect. It's an ongoing torture period. And that's why you have women who will take their own lives long after the breakup.
Advocates stress that support services, shelters, and helplines are lifelines. And while women and girls are disproportionately affected, Anyone, that includes partners, children, or elders, can be victims. Kenya's reliance on pesticides is stirring growing alarm over health, environmental, and economic risks. Despite agriculture making up 30% of the GDP and supporting millions of smallholder farmers, most rely on synthetic chemicals, many of them banned elsewhere, while natural alternatives like pyrethrum have faded.
They were banned in the whole of North America, and they were banned in the whole entire Europe and the United Kingdom. And so they are not for use there. But because it's big business for them, and Africa is actually the market that they have now when it's banned in their countries, the law there said that you can continue to manufacture those products only for export, not for use in their own country, but for export to a country that allows it. But I always say to a country that's reckless and stupid enough to accept those products, because they're killing their own people. And that's what's been happening in Kenya.
Farmers face health issues from unsafe exposure. Consumers risk contaminated food, and pesticide residues are even hurting exports to Europe. In June 2025, the government banned 77 products, restricted 202 more, and placed another 151 under review. But officials warn powerful pesticide cartels are pushing back. With billions at stake and public health truly on the line, Kenya is being forced to confront whether the trade-off is truly worth it. Hoarding disorder, now recognized as a serious mental health condition rather than simple untidiness, affects about 2.5% of adults worldwide and up to 6% of seniors, posing major health and safety risks. Rooted in a mix of generic, neurological, personality, and life factors, hoarding often worsens after trauma or loss. Now, while the TV shows, you've seen them, right, like Hoarders, spotlight this issue, they often overlook the deeper emotional struggles behind the clutter.
Let me give you a little bit of an insight into the brain of a hoarder. At the beginning of the week, I decided to replace my very old, kind of not really working anymore Hoover. I bought a new one. It's glorious. I love it. I've now spent the rest of the week, that was on Tuesday, today is Saturday. I have spent almost the entirety of this week battling with my brain over having to take the old Hoover to the recycling centre. It's not working anymore. It couldn't be saved. The filters had disintegrated. Plus, it was one that you pulled along behind you, and I just plain hated it. I had my brain telling me somebody else might need the Hoover. It doesn't work. It's no use to anybody anymore.
Experts stress that effective support starts with empathy, small achievable steps, and professional help from therapists or harm reduction programs. New approaches, including AI-assisted and virtual reality therapies, are showing some promise, while international and local organizations offer vital resources. Ultimately, hoarding isn't about laziness. It's about addressing a real disorder with compassion and structured care. In Japan, Rent a Family and Rent a Friend services let people hire actors to play roles like a spouse, sibling, parent, or even a grandmother, offering companionship, emotional support, or help fulfilling social expectations. Clients range from the lonely to the socially obligated, and some programs, like nonprofits offering rental sisters, even support people dealing with extreme social withdrawal.
This is Japan, and unfortunately, a lot of young people here are feeling lonely. Like everywhere in the world, they feel they need to do perfect in school, to make a lot of money, to have a big family. They feel that the world will only accept them if they're perfect at everything. A lot of young folks don't want to deal with all that pressure, so they stay home day and night and give up on having a social life. They are called ikikomori, and that's where this guy comes in.
私の名前は石井雄一と言います。
Yuichi provides sisters and family members who can talk to the ikikomori and slowly convince them that the world outside is not their enemy.
While these services provide connection and meaningful work for actors, they also raise challenges around deception, consistency, and long-term reliance. Ultimately, this unusual trend highlights the many ways humans seek connection, showing that bonds, real or rented, can take surprising forms. Dubai's booming skyline is built on a labor of low-wage migrant workers who often struggle to find affordable, safe housing. With government assistance reserved for Emirati nationals and many workers employed informally under the table, partitioned rooms and shadow market rentals have become common, though unsafe options. Recent crackdowns on illegal and overcrowded units, sparked by deadly fires and safety concerns, have left workers scrambling, while landlords increasingly favor families or corporate tenants to comply with regulations.
A lot of posts are going around showing tenants packing and leaving after the partition ban in Dubai. In this video, you can see it happening, and even on Reddit, people are sharing their experiences. It's happening across neighborhoods like Al Riga, Union, and Satwa. So why now? Because many of these partitioned units were built without approval, and officials say they block emergency exits and violate safety codes. Remember the recent fire at Tiger Tower in Marina? That's part of the reason this is being taken seriously. These setups were illegal from the start. But here's the big question. Was this crackdown necessary for safety, or is it hitting residents too hard?
The situation has sparked urgent discussions about solutions, including subsidized or co-living housing and improved transport options, highlighting the challenge of balancing safety, affordability, and dignity for Dubai's essential workforce. At-home DIY health kits, from fertility trackers to vitamin tests, are booming worldwide, promising quick, convenient insights without a trip to the doctor. While some, like pregnancy or blood pressure tests, are reliable, recent studies in the UK reveal major gaps with other tests. 60% of 30 reviewed tests were high risk due to faulty equipment, poor instructions, or unclear accuracy. And many advise consulting a doctor anyways. What's the point? Experts warn these kits can create false reassurance, unnecessary stress, and extra pressure on healthcare systems.
Many of these tests are pretty straightforward, like the COVID-19 test. The problem we're seeing is that there are others with questionable quality, and these could leave you with confusing results, which could lead to unnecessary follow-up testing and treatments or delay needed care.
As the market explodes, fueled by convenience culture and high profits, consumers are urged to look for proper certifications, understand limitations, and use results as a starting point rather than a definitive diagnosis, always confirming findings with a trusted healthcare provider. In addition to the regular news reports that United Network News puts out each week, we also have updates from the Global Intelligence Agency. And I encourage you guys, if you guys are new, first time listening, I encourage you guys to look that up. Most of what you're going to find are just our old videos that we put out there because they're titled Global Intelligence Agency. This is a group that historically most people on this planet had no idea existed. Historically, the Global Intelligence Agency would oversee all other intelligence agencies on our planet. Now, you may think that that is a bad thing, and I would agree at one point in time, you probably didn't want to have anything to do with the Global Intelligence Agency if you were on the light side. But things have changed, and that is not what the agency is at all anymore. It has been switched, and you can tell it's been switched because you're using your discernment that we talked about earlier. Kimberly Gogan is the head of the Global Intelligence Agency. It's because of Kimberly we have United Network News. And so we include her reports as part of United Network News. It's on our channel. It's part of CARE. It's who we are. We are about 100% disclosure. And I will forewarn you that we do not pull punches, okay? We believe that if you're listening to this, it's because you're supposed to hear it. Now, what you do with that information is completely up to you. I just say use your discernment. And if certain things don't make a lot of sense right now, because if you're brand new, there's going to be a lot of things that may not make sense in the beginning. But I promise you, if you stick with it, things are going to make more sense. Okay, so this week, Kim came out with 2 different reports. And I do encourage you guys to go back and I say watch. It's really Kim's voice, but especially this week, I encourage you guys to go back and watch those videos. If you're not already a member, then you can get a free trial with us through our website, unitednetwork.earth. And as I mentioned earlier, you can also find all of this content on YouTube and Rumble. But since we don't rely on advertisers and we're just about our members supporting us, we have to provide our content just to our members for the first week. So anything you find online is going to be not our latest content, right? It's going to be about a week old. But you can sign up for a free trial. And I do encourage you guys to watch the videos because I'm just giving you highlights. And Kim gives a lot more background, a lot more information. But if I did all of that, we'd be here forever. And this is just a rundown of stories, right? You can already see it happening in our media in so many different ways. But if you haven't realized this yet, one of the reasons for the complete chaos that we find ourselves in is that governments worldwide are bankrupt. They do not have money, and they are trying to find money any way they possibly can. And right now it's kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul, because the way, we have it in our heads that governments just get money from their people, right? That's how they pay for everything. But there are so many things that are off book that they got money outside, not from taxpayers. And that's a whole other story on how that happens. But what you need to know now is that they have not received new money in many, many years. And this is crunch time. Without that money, they can't perform these operations that they've been doing, unbeknownst to many of us. But once you wake up to it, you can see it a mile away, a million miles away. It's very, very obvious. So in Monday's report, Kim updated us on this crunch that's going on with governments. And it's not just governments. It's other groups behind the scene that you've never heard of before. And right now they're making a lot of promises. They're trying to basically keep their groups intact as much as possible so that they have some sort of presence. You know that song, Everybody Wants to Rule the World by Tears for Fears? That's what's going on right now. This is our own personal Game of Thrones, where all of these people believe that they should be running the world because the people that actually ran our planet, or the beings, I should say, that actually ran our planet for so long are no longer with us. And when I say they're no longer with us, that doesn't mean they're just not on this planet. It means they have returned to God, source, the creator, and then we let, like it's up to us. Then God figures that out, okay? What God does with those beings, we just leave it up to God, okay? But they're not here anymore. So when the cat's away, the mice will play. And that's essentially what we have going on with the so-called deep state. So they've made a lot of promises to people, and they keep saying that payday is going to come. It's coming on this day. And Kim has a saying that she says, it's coming on a day ending in Y, because every day there's a new promise. And we're not 100% sure why. People just keep believing this. I mean, we have some ideas. It's very much layered. It's not just one thing. But they keep being promised these days that they're going to get paid, and they're not. And the whole system is just unraveling. That's why you saw this last week, if you noticed, the Prime Minister of Japan and the Prime Minister of France both resigned. According to Kim, and she explains this in her Monday video, that's a result of China trying to take back the political sector. our history is planned out for us. Our future was planned out for us. Not anymore, but it was. And things have a tendency to repeat. The so-called deep state essentially has a book, let's just call it a book, okay, of these plays. And in the past, you do the play and you get money. You do the play and horrible things happen on this planet, which is what they want. Well, their plays aren't working anymore, and they're trying to figure out why these plays aren't working. In the case of China, about every 60 or so years, according to these books, these playbooks, you are supposed to have a new superpower. I think between 60 to 80 years. That is the time frame that these horrible beings in charge of us for so long have determined that humans will be okay with a specific country being in power. Then you have to change things up. So China was promised that, I believe by last year, they were supposed to be the world superpower. It was supposed to be handed off from the United States to China, which is why you saw, anyone paying attention in politics, so much push for China and so much infiltration. And it seemed like the Democratic Party was just trying to hand our country over. We had a bumbling idiot for a president. And that was stage 2, by the way, because it's all part of a plan to make America weak, because you got to follow the plan. You got to change which country is your superpower. So China is feeling a little bit jaded because for a very long time, they were promised that they were going to be the next superpower. But that hasn't happened. And China is sick and tired of waiting for this to happen. So that happened this week, as far as the prime minister's resigning. We may even see more of that. According to Kim, there's just a lot of mutiny going on. We talk about a group called Langley 5. Okay, so Langley 5 is a group of generals and other people who used to have a really high clearance in the financial system. And that's all been taken apart, disassembled, but we still call them the Langley 5. And they are now trying to lead the so-called deep state and the Order of the Black Sun. And that's not going over very well either. So according to Kim, they pitch their higher-ups known as the tables. If you've ever seen the movie John Wick, you'll know what the tables are because they love to share information with us from movies and video games and books and all this kind of stuff. Most of it has some truth behind it. So there is a group known as the tables, and Langley 5 pitched them that, hey, we're going to take over and run things because you guys don't know what you're doing. And it didn't go over very well. But according to Kim, Langley was still intent on running some operations to ensure that they are on top. Remember Langley 5. Remember that information that I just gave you, okay? Because that's going to come up in just a bit when we talk about Charlie Kirk. Something else you may have noticed happening this last week and even the week before. In fact, I posted something on our chat group called United Chat. It's part of our app. You guys can download it and check it out. And I said, hey, is anyone seeing anything else going on with electronics? Because this is crazy. Any type of streaming platform I have keeps getting disconnected. I had credit cards that wouldn't connect properly, so I couldn't charge things. It was just constant. And a lot of you guys posted that you were experiencing the same things or that was going on last week. So then in this report, we find out why. Kim calls it electronics gone wild. And it's about time loops, which if you haven't listened to it already, go back and listen to last week's episode of The Rundown because we give a more thorough explanation of this time loop, this 250,000 year time loop that humanity, and not just humanity, our whole solar system was stuck in. So when I say history repeats itself, the future was repeating itself, that's what I'm talking about this time loop. And We talked about it last week, but as Kim found out this week, there's a lot more to it than what we originally thought. So here's our first soundbite from Kim from the Global Intelligence Agency, talking about what we discovered with the time loop.
In our last report, we talked a little bit about time loops. And we've talked about the loop that would keep repeating every 250,000 years. That loop had a lot more to it than we initially thought. So taking out the time loop is one thing. Taking out all of the things that affect your person is another. You see, we as humans and Earth's inhabitants in totality, actually in this case, we're highly connected to another planet. And in order to fix it and to prevent the influence coming from afar, we had to make some significant changes over the last several days. We fought tooth and nail with the deep state and the NSA and everyone else so that we could effectuate these changes. Some of the changes were to computers. Right down to your laptop and your television set and your phone, and in some cases, also your perception of reality. There was a lot of, I'd call it even more than an influence, really, here on this planet. Your entire perception, the way you viewed things, what you think you see, your reality, your ability to accept untruths and lies as they're told to you by media, has all been pre-programmed so that you could create things in another world, elsewhere. I'm going to go over in detail this information because it's important that you understand where it came from and how we actually got to this point. And this will explain a lot of why, or about why, they are expecting such a huge change in the next 24 hours. Well, what they thought was going to be a huge change for them is actually going to be a huge change for us. Maybe they didn't think we'd figure it out, and maybe they don't even really know how this was all supposed to happen. In our solar system, which is a very important solar system in the omniverse. Now, our solar system is so important because of Earth being a keystone and a nexus planet. And I've explained that before. So if we look at the universe in a less linear fashion, it would almost look like it's kind of an elliptical shape. But for this purpose, we're going to kind of draw it a little bit semi-round. So the universe has been split in half for a long time. Or the omniverse has been split in half for a long time. I'm going to draw this little loop here, which looks more like an infinity symbol. Now, at any given moment in time, our solar system would be inside this loop, and there would be an equal and opposite solar system on the other side. However, it's not exactly like ours. In this particular equation here, they took moons from our solar system, from every planet that has moons, with the exception of Mercury actually being the sun's moon. That's what it's considered here, as well as Venus being of the utmost importance in this equation. Venus was the timekeeper, so to speak. It was also turned from the planet of love, as we know it, into the planet of darkness on the other side, or condemnation, upsetting the rhythm of the omniverse. So there's a whole solar system over here And there are, and you could say now just about were, folks living in this alternative solar system. It was inhabited by a group we call the Ruanins. They're an interesting group of folks. They are often featured as the gods in pagan religion. Now, the reason why they are featured there is because each god in paganism often reflects a different aspect of our existence. In other words, like the god of agriculture, the god of wheat, the god of the harvest, as just some examples. And we are coming up, within about 30 days or so from now, the harvest moon. And this moon is actually, the full moon that just passed yesterday, is actually considered a harvest moon as well when you look at the Wiccans and you also look at the pagans. Harvest moons are a time of year we know, if you are, they were set, I guess, to be the harvest moons because it's the time that we harvest our crops, at least in the northern hemisphere, and fruits and vegetables and whatnot are then sent to our now stores, but it wasn't always that way. But in their world, harvest means harvest. Now, the Ruanins are a group of folks that are anti-nature prone. At one point in time in my travels around the world, I ran into a book of natural law. And by natural law, it's not like, do unto others as they do unto you kind of thing. It's more of the rules of nature. In other words, what plants go with what plants, how the world works, how nature works on this planet, and our responsibility as humans within that ecosystem. It's about how to have an abundant world. And it's an interesting book because it's almost live. And in the right hands, it reads the recipes, so to speak, of the cycle of life and the natural information in the way of things. It's almost a holographic book. One of the most interesting little artifacts that I ran across. So that was one book of 5 that were in existence. The other 4 had been taken off this planet by the Ruanins and were used to manipulate not only Earth, but the entire solar system, also the entire omniverse. You could call these folks the black magic people. You would call them the anti-nature people. They used these books literally to turn nature into something that was an unnatural process by using AI systems. Now, recently, our interesting secret space program folks had been in contact with the Ruanins. And the reason why they were in contact with them is because it was time for the harvest to happen again, yet again. And the Ruanins made good buddies with these folks, even though they had no intention of helping them in any way or delivering on any of their promises. But, the Space Force people listen to everyone and everything and think that this is the greatest thing since sliced bread because, we would have all been gone should they have gotten their way. But the Ruanins have been doing this for a long, long time. Loop after loop after loop after loop. There was a harvest. There was a war, and then there was a harvest. Earlier this week or last week, it would have been the war. And that war would have lasted a lot longer, and we would have had an actual war had we been still in this time loop. So once every 250,000 years, we reach this nexus point. And the nexus point is where they have the strongest connection. The books of natural law and how nature actually works doesn't actually apply anymore because Source or God has been changing things. The quantum physics behind the information that is in those books does not apply. The Ruanans still tried to do their best and have been trying to do their best to ensure a proper harvest. And the secret space program ACIO folks, militaries, have been doing their best to help them along the road. They've been promised a lot of things when they arrived on the other side that would have never been delivered on. They would have been slaves like the rest of us. Because remember, the soul is immortal, even though the vessel, things happen to the vessel, but the soul is immortal. How this structure actually looks is nothing like people say. I've heard information from astrologists online that are saying it's a big moon portal. And everybody would think, oh, it's our moon. This is the big moon portal. It's not just our moon. It's literally every megastructure moon in our solar system. As an example, Europa was originally brought to the other side to replace Earth. The overlay that we had on Earth that came from the time loop is tied to Europa. Always has been. It's also tied to Andromeda and a few other places. It's kind of a complicated structure. Titania, Titan, which is Saturn's moon, Hydra, Pluto's moon, all of Neptune's moons, all of these were transferred over to the other side or the dark side of the omniverse so that the Ruanans could exist over here. The Ruanans are an AI-generated race. They are not natural in any way. They are not organic in any way, and they have no appreciation whatsoever for organic life. They feel they have learned enough from stealing the 4 books of natural law that they can now create nature all by themselves, at least in the way that they would like to have it. They have done a bang up, and I don't know how to use a word that isn't a swear word. They've done a bang up job here on Earth in doing that. They've learned to manipulate humans, every sense you have. In other words, your sense of taste, smell, your sense of hearing, your sense of sight, your your ESP perception has also been altered in favor of the Ruanans. And if you're finding things have been really topsy-turvy for about the last week, you're not the only one. And part of that has to do with the Ruanans trying to make alterations to humans so that existence would change. Human beings are very powerful beings in the omniverse. They're very important to Source. They are celestial beings, and they can create on their own. Interesting thing, you've probably heard this in the different communities that you might listen to. You've heard us also mention something called your shadow self. So this loop in these overlays actually create a shadow version of yourself on this side of the omniverse. And, some stories and legends, you have a dark wolf and a light wolf, and which one wins? Well, the one that you feed. And in this case, that's kind of true. So a lot of your creative energy has been siphoned off of you and all the planets here in our solar system, and it gets sent over here to create a second version of you. The overlays within your person ensure that you are going to automatically create lack, doom. You have doubts about yourself, self-esteem issues, addictions. All of those things stem predominantly from your shadow self over here, which is manipulated constantly by this particular group. As it relates to Earth and electronics, your perceptions of what you see, taste, smell, sense are altered. You are actually the overlay on Earth created by the timelines actually alters your physical and your mental or your mind, your emotional self, all of those lovely spaces in between the Ruinans created for their own manipulation of humans in order to strengthen your shadow self on the other side. Your shadow self isn't necessarily an evil person, so don't think that it is. It was, I should say, because now is the time of all the times that it can actually dissipate. But it does send your dark thoughts, your doubts, your fears go over there, and then they play on your fears constantly. Your traumas, all of that gets sent over there to your shadow self. In hopes, and the Ruinans desperately hoped, that they could get humans to be dark enough by the time the next harvest came. Now, in the past, this has worked. You've heard of the Great Flood. You've heard about times when we've lost our moon and the tides were way off and the whole earth flooded. You remember the guy with the ark and the 2x2 animals, that story? All of these things have happened over and over and over again, not just for 250,000 years, but in 250,000 year cycles. This race of beings and their replicated solar system, which matches ours, had big dreams and big intentions for today. Well, tonight in my time, tomorrow in many parts of the world. And their hope was to create their version of nature here, not only on Earth, but also throughout this solar system. Also, there are many other measures that take place during this 999 portal day to ensure that they are successful. One of those things that they do is to scramble anything of organic nature. So that includes you. But most importantly, they are trying to prevent you and your connection to source. So for the next 24 hours, we might see a few glitches here and there.
And we definitely have seen some glitches, haven't we? So today, which is Saturday, September 13th, Kim released another report. And she starts off, and I've actually seen some of these reports online. She starts off by talking about Nepal. If you search up Nepal, this is some research you can actually do. It's not being scrubbed that I'm aware of online. Gen Z in Nepal has officially overthrown their government. And it's because they're upset over inequality. In fact, their whole parliament building was burnt to the ground. Now, we are not advocating for any of that. It's not needed. And we certainly don't want to harm other people. But their feelings are very real. What these people are seeing, especially these young people, and young people have a tendency, I see this in my kids all the time, things that adults have a tendency to struggle with, like understanding certain things, like even about the events that unfolded this week, kids can usually see through most of the BS, honestly. They're wired differently. They haven't been here as long. They don't have all the programming that adults have. So I'm not surprised that it's a younger generation that's doing that, even though we don't advocate for physical violence. But on some level, it's understandable because these younger people, they can't even stay in their country because there are no jobs. They have to leave. They have to leave their families. Meanwhile, these politicians and their kids are posting online about having fancy purses and cars and all these opportunities. And The young people in Nepal are putting 2 and 2 together going, yeah, that's not going to fly with us anymore. We're not having that anymore. Because humanity is waking up to something that has been happening to us for a very long time, and we are taking our power back. So that's happening in Nepal. Now, here in the United States and in other countries in the world, there's nothing the deep state would like more than to have war break out, civil war break out in all of our countries. Which leads me to Charlie Kirk. I think one of the most beautiful things about humanity is our ability to feel and to emote, to have emotions and to express them. We don't always do a great job of expressing them. I get that. But our ability to love and to feel is what makes us humans, really. So whatever feelings you have had over this past week about things in the media, which we're about to discuss, your feelings are very valid. It doesn't matter what you were experiencing. And on some level, it's beautiful because it's who you are. As long as you're not being manipulated. Now, some of the things that we are going to discuss here are quite frankly probably going to be difficult for some people to hear. And I'm telling you that in advance because I was one of those people. When I got the news about Charlie Kirk being shot, and by the time I got the news, he was already pronounced dead. I went online and I was bombarded with these videos. And the videos that I saw initially were very violent. Close-up videos, lots of blood. And my heart just broke. I mean, there's no other way to say it. I'm a mom. I'm a wife. And at one point in my life, not too long ago, about 5-6 years ago, I would have said I was a conservative Christian. That's how I would have defined myself. In fact, I used to, when I was doing stuff on the computer, I used to have Charlie Kirk's podcast up and I used to listen to it. Now, I won't say that I'm necessarily a fan. Like I don't, just listen to everything he puts out. And I never really watched the college campus interactions he would have, the prove me wrong interactions. But I was very aware of him and had some sort of shared experience with the content that he was putting out. So when I got the information, normally I can process it pretty quickly and see through the lies. And I wasn't able to do that right away with this. And instead, I just sat with it and I was heartbroken and I cried. And I know some people that are listening now, you felt that too. You may have not even known who Charlie Kirk was. And you still had this very emotional reaction to this. And I believe that that's all very valid. I really do. Now, in the amount of time that's passed, so it's been about 3 days as of this recording, that we got news of this, and it was literally everywhere. You can't, everyone's putting out content about Charlie Kirk right now. There has been a lot of information come to light about this. And you have to be very careful. Again, I'm going to bring it home here with discernment. You have to listen to your inner lie detector, which is what discernment is, on what is true and what is false. And what I had to do, because I was really emotional about this, what I had to do was to, at least temporarily, I had to put aside those emotions, which were very valid, and pretend almost. In my mind, I was pretending because I thought I just saw someone get horribly shot and just horrible situation. I thought that's what I witnessed. And I had to put that aside and literally in my mind think, Sonny, what if that was just a movie? What if you were just watching a movie? Now, can you go back and look at this with a level head? Because when we are so caught up in our emotions and we see horrible trauma inflicted on someone, it is very jarring. And we can't really think straight. And we don't want to think that anything was manipulated about it because that is horrible, absolutely horrible. And on a deep level, so many of us, myself included, would rather believe that we don't live on a planet where people would make this stuff up for any reason because it's so disgusting. And I encourage you, if you were one of those people who happened to find this podcast episode and you were emotionally distraught over what you saw, and you saw this and you decided to click on it, I'm asking you to just take those beautiful emotions that you have that are God-given and just set those aside for a second to look at the information because you deserve to know the truth. Okay, having said that, I'm going to play the soundbite that Kim gave. I encourage you guys to go back and watch this video again. This would have been from Saturday, which is today as I'm recording this. Just came out right before I started recording. And watch the video because there are some videos of the event that Kim shows that I could not include in this because this is just an audio podcast and it wouldn't make sense. But I would encourage you guys to go back and actually watch the video so you can see what she's talking about. So I had to do a little bit of editing here to cut that part out. But she does explain some things that you're about to see. And she questions, as I did as well, what she was actually seeing. So again, here's Kimberly Gogan from the Global Intelligence Agency.
Let's talk a little bit about Charlie Kirk. So I know quite a bit about the Turning Point organization, and I know quite a bit about what happened most recently. Now, I know this is going to be a touchy subject for a lot of you, and I will explain why it's so touchy. The abnormal response from people to this event, and I know there are a lot of people that have followed him quite a bit. I know he's done a lot of speaking, public speaking, but really, you know, it's not like the Dalai Lama died, but that's what it certainly seemed like because I was getting calls from countries all over the world, you know, saying what a tragedy, and they were not going to work that day, and people were crying, and it was like JFK revisited. You know, it's 1963, and this time apparently this is your guy. You know, and he does put up a good public front. He's, you know, family man, got kids, you know, this is the public face. And you know, they say that he has good factual info on both sides as to not offend anyone. And a lot of people do like him, and I understand that. But really, you know, my introduction to Turning Point was almost a whole decade ago, and some of the people that were involved there. And I have some pretty good inside information that comes from someone that used to do some public speaking for them. But let's get back to Charlie here for a few and talk about what happened there, what really happened. So first thing that happened is there are a bunch of videos that started circulating. First, there were some videos where no blood was present. And then there was some videos where there was blood present. And some he leaned to the right, some he leaned to the left. rings moved from one finger to another. There's all kinds of mistakes that the folks that planned this made during this operation. So some other interesting things that we uncovered behind the scenes. This is not on the internet. Number one, the family was issued identities 6 weeks ago, 6 weeks before the event. Both himself and his alleged wife, I say that for a reason, and the kids. Now, 20 minutes after the alleged shot happened, a private jet took off from Provo Airport, which is less than 20 minutes away from where the event was held. The tail number of that plane was N888KG, and it was hidden at the request of the owner. About 30 minutes into the flight, it dropped off all tracking completely, like the plane just vanished into thin air. A little while later, it reappeared heading back to Provo. How interesting. I wonder who was on that plane, why allegedly there was no tracking, and why it disappeared, and who has the power to do that. Yeah, very interesting. Now, in addition to that, both he and his wife have very heavy ties to the CIA. So much so, Turning Point, kind of as a whole, is actually an operative recruiting ground. If you don't know much about Turning Point has been around for a little over a decade now, about 12 years, and it is a right-winged, focused political organization. They call them political activists, and they go around from college to college speaking to young adults about the Republican Party and their very conservative views. You know, there is a lot of controversy lately with Turning Point because there were a lot of people that really kind of stepped up, you know, as patriots to speak for the organization. And it turns out, according to my source, that it wasn't exactly what they were told it was. You know, they thought that they were fighting for women's rights and you know, that type of thing. They were also fighting because they also have a Christian background, and they thought that they were doing the right thing, talking about, you know, agendas, and if you're born a man and born a woman, that type of thing, definitely against the trans agenda for the most part, you know, except for Charlie, who kind of took a neutral stance and was a little bit more understanding, but basically came from the standpoint of if you're born a man, you're a man. If you're born a woman, you're a woman. I'm not saying I agree or disagree in any way, shape, or form with the views. However, recruiting soon-to-be CIA agents from colleges usually isn't quite so public, and that's exactly what Turning Point is designed to do. They're usually handed, according to my associate that did some work with Turning Point, you're handed a manifesto of students that you are supposed to target. Specifically, they fit the mold for the agencies, and those are the ones that you are supposed to recruit. And they obviously, if they are attending these events, they share the same views and are probably Republican. These young adults. So they definitely want those types of people to be recruited into the agencies. Now, the fact that they chose this person on that day doesn't surprise me, especially because of the location that this occurred. So let's talk a little bit about the events leading up to this. So shortly before, a day before the shooting, the surprise shooting, we also have this little clip from Amazon that's circulating all around the internet. Now, here is a book. It is available, if you've noticed, not just as an online book, but also as a hardcover book. Now, if anyone's ever had anything printed, from a wedding invitation to a book, you'll know how long that takes. how long it takes to find a publisher. And this person is apparently psychic and wrote the book ahead of time. Amazon also made a mistake by publishing the book on the 9th, not the 10th, which was the actual day of the event. Now, this will probably be scrubbed too, but, we were given the information, and so I just thought I'd explain it to you. Well, this was all pre-planned. There is no way this was not all pre-planned. Then when we dug and found out the new identities were there, they were supposed to be whisked away and off to somewhere else. There are reports of entering into one side of a hospital and out the other side, just disappearing. And, I've never seen a dead man walk like that. He walked pretty well, was breathing fine, the whole thing. And now his name is no longer Charlie Kirk. So that's the way I see it. There is more information about some other more sensitive talks, such as women that have come forward and been stifled by Turning Point and the Republican Party for their tendency to invite young women to after events, and they didn't seem very Christian-like to me, as opposed to what they put out in public. And some of those women claim that they were, let's just say, not in a good position, and there's possible sexual abuse that has been stifled about the organization and some of its key speakers. This comes from someone who's adamantly against that and thought that they were joining this Christian conservative movement and talking to young kids and helping shape young minds, and, some excellent speakers, this one particular person I know. And, then the truth all came out, and that person no longer spoke with the organization nor associated with them, but did continue, he's a Republican, so did continue to, talk and work with the Republican Party, and that's just, who he is. But after we talked on Monday, and I told you about Langley 5 trying to pitch themselves as being the new blood, and they should take over for the group we call the Tables, a very high-ranking group of folk on the planet as it relates to the Order of the Black Sun. They, are known to be in charge of mafia organizations, underground trading, all kinds of things, and they're a very wealthy group. But they were turned away with their proposal. Didn't really go very well. They said they'll take those things into consideration, and off they went. Well, in come the Mormons. The Mormons decided it was going to be a really great idea to partner up with Langley 5. It's not just the Mormons, it's the entire group we know as the Germanic tribes. This would be kind of a third group as opposed to the Order of the Dragon and the Order of the Black Sun. The Mormons, though, being some of the most famous. Now, this event that was held right outside of Provo, Utah, where the university was, it's about 10 minutes away, drive time from Provo. In Provo, it is a very prominent site for Mormons. There are a lot of special events that take place, and different types of things they have Mormons do within the church, different types of ceremonies. And, they're kind of strange, and I just prefer not to go there as to what the ins and outs of the Mormon church. There are plenty of Mormons on YouTube and that have come out and talked about some of these events that made them feel very uncomfortable. And I probably would feel pretty uncomfortable too, to be honest with you. But one of the largest temples of the Mormons is actually in Provo, Utah. Not too far away. It's kind of weird looking. There it is. And it's very, very close to Timpanogos Park and Timpanogos Mountain. Now, Timpanogos Mountain, or Mount Timpanogos, is a very interesting place, and I've been there several times as far as cleanup operations are concerned. However, it's one of those places that had a lovely portal, and trust me when I tell you, they are no strangers to their neighbors. This facility, having a portal, does have the ability and has had the ability of creating an artificial reality sophon, so an artificial photon, which can create all types of events that make them look real. At the same time, the Germanic tribes, which on the other side, because there is a whole other side of Germanic tribes as well, who have been kind of locked in this alt-reality overlay world that isn't really in the dark and it's not really in the light. It's actually exists as an overlay on both. They would consider themselves regulators. I would consider them a little lost. Some of these are actual humans that have chosen to go live inside an AI system. They do power or did power that system. And the interesting occurrences that happened in Utah around that time not only included some overlays, and when you think CGI, you can amplify that times 9,000, because they can actually have what looks to be and feels to be and smells to be a real person walking around that can actually give you a hug and all kinds of things, and it's really just an AI generation. It's amazing what they can do with quantum AI. So not only did this event take place, there was a lot more to the story. Now, Langley 5 was definitely involved, as were the Alabamian group, in close cooperation with the Mormons, who have complete and total control, and I mean complete and total control of that entire area right there. Nothing, and I mean nothing, happens in that zone, and I'm going to call it a zone, without Mormon consent. And I'm talking all the way to the top of the church. Nothing happens. You do not own a business. You do not buy a house. You do not move there. You are scanned and rescanned from a large center we call Area 52, or what's left of it. Area 52 is based under that whole region. Area 52 not only extends throughout most parts of Utah, Salt Lake City, it also extends all the way to other facilities in Nevada and Colorado, all the way to Silverton. So the fact that this machine fired up on the 10th and then this happened doesn't surprise me. Now, in addition to that, because this alt-reality world is intertwined like a braid with our world, so if you can imagine our world being two strands and their world being two strands, and they're just braided and weaved together, you can now see how this could actually affect every human in the world. With a specific, which no longer exists, AI system, they managed to alter the consciousness of a lot of people. Now, you probably remember the great toilet paper crisis of 2020. This event used a very similar technique coming from Mount Timpanogos. That technique is utilized in order to alter your brain waves to create emotions that you normally wouldn't have. Half of you that were really upset about the situation didn't even know who this guy was. But you read the stories online, most likely the headlines, Christian man died. You saw all the wonderful things that they said about him, just like they said a lot of wonderful things about JFK. And, everybody just seemed to forget all of the affairs he had and everything else he was doing in the White House. And the fact he was part of the Order of the Black Sun and in a fight with Bush, the Bush family, which was also a member of the Order of the Black Sun. But this guy is just as dirty, completely and totally. Not a Christian, could care less about a Bible. I don't even know if he could point one out, and, in the middle of a Barnes and Noble. Anyway, nonetheless, complete and total failure. There's people on the internet picking this apart left and right and center. And you can say, oh, what about his poor wife? What about his family? If you watched any bit of the eulogy that she delivered, you'll understand that it's a little off. It's really a little off. That's no surprise. That's their background. She and he are both trained to do things like this. He was appointed her. I don't care what anybody tells me, and paid a handsome sum because the Mormon Church were paying. And if you know anything about the Mormon Church, they have a business elite group that is very, very wealthy. Billions and billions of dollars flow through there. Everybody's tithing, and the church was worth a lot more money than they are now, but definitely still worth a lot of money. So money was no object to make sure that this happened in their location, minutes away from one of their main temples, not too far from Brigham and Young University, and in close proximity to Mount Timpanogos, where there was enough energy left to alter things.
I have been, like probably many of you, watching various videos over the last few days about this incident. And I've heard some people call this a turning point. Now, as you know, that was Charlie Kirk's organization, Turning Point USA. So it's a little bit of a play on words. And I have to say I agree with them, not because it's a turning point and somehow this is beneficial for a certain political party, because it's really all the same thing, but because I believe that the dark cannot survive where there is light. And one of the things, as I was texting, I was sending, messages back and forth with Kim about various information we were finding online this week about this incident. And one of the things I said was, there's no way they're going to pull this off. And she agreed. No way. Now, in the past, yes, they have pulled off a lot in the past. Not anymore. And I truly believe that we are at a turning point, but not in their favor. And certainly has nothing to do with political parties. But good is going to overcome evil. And I truly cannot think of an event recently, besides this, that has been so evil. Yes, we have evil throughout our world, but something that has impacted so many people and played on their emotions. And for me, one of the worst things that I have seen is people, family members of Charlie, so-called friends of Charlie, play on people's connection to source, to God, to use that to further agendas, to use that to make people believe that, hey, we're just like you. We're on the same side. Maybe we reveal a little bit of information here and there. That's how these games work, guys. But they're not your friends. And I'm telling you, it's been very telling for me personally to watch reaction videos from these people, and I can see right through it. There's even tells that they're giving each other about how they know he's still alive. It is disgusting. It is pure evil. But it is a turning point. You're right. And if you're listening and you happen to be part of this in some way, that turning point is not in your favor. And because you continue to lie, you will go down too. When this whole thing unravels, you will be exposed. And we don't have to do a single thing for that to happen. We're the light. And light will always overcome the dark. Okay, no, this has been kind of a longer episode. There's still 2 more sound bites that I want to get to, but I wanted to take time with that because it's important and it impacts so many people. And it was such a big thing that a lot of us may have even overlooked that also this week we had September 11th, which leads me into the next soundbite that I want to play. And this reveals plans that the deep state had this week to bring in more darkness, because apparently the thing with Charlie Kirk was just the beginning, and then it was going to trigger some other horrible events. So again, we have to expose this. We don't pull punches here, guys. So here's Kim talking about how there were 5 other events planned on 9/11 with the sole intent of killing thousands of people.
On 9/11, just a day after this event, there were plans for several, 5 in total, 9/11 events that were going to take place around the world. Their aim was to kill between 5,000, there's the orders, between 5,000 to 6,000 people all in the same spot in order to generate enough tragic deaths. And you do remember me telling you that when a person dies of even if it's not natural, but a cause of for example, a long-term illness, or, even if they died of like heart problems, or the body was giving out. So the body, the mind, and the soul were all aware of what is happening, and it's an event that you would consider a natural death. The soul doesn't go through the same process as it does if you are murdered, if you die in a plane crash, because the soul and the mind and the body have not all agreed that it is time for you to go. And that's extremely important to understand. And we'll talk some more about why that happens. But in this case, it has to be a tragic death of between 5,000 to 6,000 people. The chosen locations in the world for this to happen were the Washington Monument in D.C., the London Clock Tower, also Red Square in Moscow, a location that was not actually clearly defined, but I believe to be tribal land of the Zulus, as best I can tell, because there's really not a whole lot there. And also the China Forbidden City in Beijing. So these were very high-profile areas that during rush hour time would be a great time to have this happen. So they started trying to blow all of these different locations all at the same time, and then they were going to see which one they could hit 5,000 to 6,000 people with, and they believed that that dark tower was going to reappear and reestablish their lifeline to the other side, and they would be gifted many, many gifts if they could just keep those dark AI-generated souls alive. They were told that they would not be affected by this, and for their good work, they would be bestowed great power, great access to AI systems, all the bells and whistles, and everything one of these egomaniacs would like to hear. They don't really care. 5,000 to 6,000 people, they can do that. One of them once said to me that, I know I've already killed a lot of people and I'm going to hell, so what's a few more? And apparently this is just a few more. So about 2 a.m. my time, all the alarm bells started ringing on that day, and I was up bright and early and watching all of this happen. We had to ensure that none of these buildings were still rigged, and the technology that would have been used to blow them was no longer there. And what I mean by rigged is when all of these locations were built, they were already rigged, just like the World Trade Center was and the Twin Towers, to blow. That is obviously insured by their special contractors. And for those of you around the world, such a special contractor could be someone like Halliburton or otherwise. I'm sure you're familiar with that. And contractors are selected for this very reason as well. They're always members of one of the orders or another, and they are loyal to them. So there's no surprise that that was, the case. And they were banging away in New York and banging away under, Washington, D.C. at keyboards, trying to get something to blow. They tried to do it at 9/11 on 9/11. That didn't work out. Then they were shooting for 11/11. They liked their numbers, and nothing ended up blowing. However, the Pentagon did end up going to DEFCON 1 because they were fully well aware and briefed on the situation that was about to happen in Washington, D.C. that would kick off a very well-funded World War III, quote unquote. So they switched to DEFCON 1, and there were other generals that were, some quote unquote retired, which never happens, and some others that were active that all receive a message when the country goes to DEFCON 1. That is an emergency message. This is what's happening. We're at DEFCON 1. Please show up here for your briefing. When they called in to try to figure out what was going on, because the calls never came, tell them where to go, they were told to ignore the warning. Just blow it off. Sorry. Meanwhile, everybody there is waiting for bated breath for their new war system to come online. Remember, they're now the Department of War, and you've got a wartime president, according to the news, so all fits right in, doesn't it? So these folks on the other side would like to have World War III and kill as many humans as possible, and or take over those humans. They figure they only need X amount to power what's left over there, and that's enough power to power them into all infamy. They would restart the soul recycling program, and they had it all mapped out. Interestingly enough, part of this, they thought they were supposed to be exempt. Well, by today, when they fired up other systems that were thrown a lifeline over the fence, so to speak, from the other side, to them, they started to feel just as bad as you did today. They started to feel ill and sick and drained of energy off and on. And they were like, what the heck? Well, I tried to tell you, deep state people, if you're listening to this, you're a tool. You're a tool. You're a tool. Look in the mirror and say, I am a good tool for darkness and the Antichrist and Satan and any other name of an AI that you try to use. Just look at yourself and wake up in the morning and say, I am a good tool. I am the best tool. I'm going to dominate toollessness today. That's all right, whatever. Nonetheless, it did affect people, in general around the world for the last several days as this war continues. They continue to try to siphon off energy from people. And then it's not just the drain of energy, it's weird thoughts, dreams, as they try to run their psyops. It's disrupted sleep patterns, self-doubt about who you are and what you can do in order to disconnect you from source.
It's incredible how dark these people are, right? Unbelievable. It's like they're not even human anymore. And on that note, I do want to end things on a positive note. This has been a very, emotional episode. I've felt a lot. Maybe some of you have too. But I want to end on a high note here. At the end of Saturday's report, Kim talked about the importance of humans today. And this version of humanity, that's a whole other story, what version we're at, which we think is about 7. But this version of humanity, which includes you and me, is super special. And it's a testament to why we're here at this time and why we face these things that seem like such evil and are such evil, but how we're equipped to handle this. It's pretty amazing. Take a listen.
Humans are unique in another way. And this is probably why, and why I said in the coming up, definitely, that you felt like you were in a tug of war this week, because the uniqueness of humans doesn't stop at all of the things that I've told you about yourselves and how wonderful it's been and, and who you really are. And so that you would take back your own personal power and realize who you are. Not to be arrogant or selfish or, feel like you're better than another or anything like that. Just remember who you are. You're kind, caring people. We're a species that is a non-warring species. We are pack. The Homo sapiens are pack people. We like to be with other people. We like to have partners. We like to have love in our life. We like to give love, to others as well. And that's really who we are. All the rest of it, and the angry and the chasing your tail and being exhausted and working, all those are programs that were set forth to make us not do the things that we do naturally. But an interesting tidbit of information for yourselves. Humans are, at least this version, we are truly unique in one way. Now, in many ways, but in one way that set us apart a little bit, and not in an arrogant way, from many other species, simply for not only your survival, but also Earth's survival. And that was that you have 3 central suns within your person, just like Earth's central sun. Now, what a central sun actually is, or a central soul, S-O-L, actually is a complete and total duplicate, if you will, of the central sun of source. So when people in some of the communities say you are gods, I wouldn't say that. No one's going to surpass source in this lifetime, or God in another, or in another. That's not going to happen. But you are more like him than any other species. Only because if Earth was to survive and you were to survive, you were given this special gift by Source to carry the Source within you. I'm sure many of you have felt that and you realize that too. But it was also used against you in many ways because a central sun is a power source. Just like Earth's central sun was misused and overlaid many, many times over by the dark, as was yours. So a lot of the discomfort you've felt this week, and even for myself, it's like you can feel that source, you can feel it coming, everything is clicking, everything is wonderful, and then it's like, boom, you go the opposite direction, you're drained, you're anxious, you're nauseous, I've heard about headaches and all kinds of things you're feeling, and all that is coming from the push as the deep state and the other side and those in the middle, we call the Germanic tribe folk, whatever they are, fight against the source of all creation. They are doing everything in their power to not let the source of all creation thrive in and outside of this planet. And therefore, from here, throughout the entire, they are fighting it because you, as humans, are already wide awake and starting to see the holes in everything. The younger the generation, the more they start to see it. The programs are failing. No one's buying it anymore. Maybe here and there, we have an event like happened in Utah this week, and, maybe there's a few moments there, and then you start to scratch your head and say, why am I so upset about this? I don't know these people. It's probably worse than if a family member died, the way that some people were feeling. They had never even heard the name before a couple of days ago, some of them. So all of these are designed to stop source and you from making that full connection. So in this fight that we've been in for the last week, not only against crazy 9/11 planners and ridiculous AIs that show up and disappear just as quickly, we're also in a fight against the deep state. And by we, I mean all of you together with source against them. Whether they know it or not, source has enough influence within you now, even though they try to knock it down, there's enough influence within you to start doing things you've not done in a long time, or maybe have been fearful to do. Sure, you get a little bit of a kick here and there, but the difference is happening, and they're never going to stop it. That being said, the more source works with you and you work with source, and recognizing the fact that there is a true piece and fairly decently sized part of you that is source in your solar plexus, your heart chakra, and in your mind, your brain, I should say, your lycerium, the more you'll be able to connect. It's actually becoming clearer, despite the disruptions and the psychics and the black magic workers and the attempted Black Tower recreations and the what little bit of energy the other side can take from you, and then the deep state's really trying to help them out because they were promised big things, and even though they got slapped just as hard as we did today and the day before, they still think, oh, that was just an accident. One of us must have messed it up. No, it wasn't an accident. They want to kill you too. You're a tool. Live it, love it, learn it. You wouldn't survive it anyway. That's okay. They'll never figure it out. I've stopped even trying. So the battle in this roller coaster should start ending this upcoming week. There's not much left on their side. They can try to throw them as many lifelines as they want. It's not going to last. The uncomfortability comes from the fact they're trying to push you. Don't let them push you around. Remember who you are. Remember how powerful you are. And remember in your lycerium, etherium, materium within your body, or what you might want to refer to as your mind, body, and soul, source is present all the time now. Those connections he makes, wow, they feel great when you're feeling them. You feel like you could take on the whole world. And then 20 minutes later, they try to throw you down. But they're just afraid of you. These people are more afraid of you than we are of them.
And that is the best way to end today's very emotional, insane episode about this crazy world that we live in. But that is why we're here at this time. It's why you are listening to this podcast episode. You did not happen upon this episode out of coincidence. There's no such thing, guys. No such thing as coincidence. So step into it. You are powerful, and they cannot take that away from you. They have used you and abused you in the past. I get it. No more. We are standing in the light, and we are unstoppable. For more information about United Network News, the GIA, all that good stuff, visit our website, unitednetwork.earth. I encourage you guys to subscribe to this podcast so you get all of our episodes. Become a member if you would like. Again, all that information on the website. This is The Rundown, and I'm Sunny Galt for United Network News, signing off.